Joining us on the program from the Free Speech Union, Nick Hanne. Kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Good day, Andrew. Good to be with you.
Now, this certainly is a case that caused some controversy, and I know that both the Free Speech Union here at Rhema, there's been a lot of people interested in following this case. But for those who haven't heard it before, give us a quick overview. What's the background? What happened here?
Okay, so last year, the Free Speech Union was contacted by Portia. She's a Kiwi Chinese journalist. She came here from China over 2 decades ago, wanting to live in a democracy, wanting to, exercise her free speech and be a proper journalist, because, of course, in China, that's just not possible.
Yeah.
In doing all of that, she's come to be quite an expert in the field of Chinese government influence in this country. And so she has tried to expose the influence peddling, which we've seen, unfortunately, in our national politics, in the major parties, but also there's been pressure applied across the board and also at local government level.
Yeah.
And one of the people that she had been investigating, I'm still not going to name this person because it's still a little bit sensitive at this point, but we will soon enough. She was investigating somebody who was involved in the Labour Party at local government level.
Mm-hmm.
He was an aspiring politician. And in an exchange online on a Chinese chat forum, there was sort of a back and forth where she and he called each other a few names, but it was nothing that I think anybody would consider particularly offensive. It was part of the argy-bargy of political commentary, and it got a little bit personal. However, what happened was this person, years later, about 5 years later, decided, as a result of further investigations that Portia had been doing into Chinese government sort of interference in New Zealand or influence, this person decided to use the comments from this chat forum in 2019 to bring a case against Portia under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. And this, if people don't know, the HDCA was created primarily to help young people when they were being bullied and victimized online.
Yeah.
Now, this has been appropriated by cynical adults in order to further political agendas. And in this case, there seems to be some pretty strong evidence to suggest that it's being used by those sympathetic to an authoritarian regime in this democracy to silence democratic voices who are trying to call out their influence.
Oh no!
So she was silenced.
Essentially, the Chinese Communist Party is being bullied by a New Zealand journalist. They need defending by this Harmful Digital Communications Act. This seems ridiculous, doesn't it?
It does. And so then they are using our own law, and I say they as in people sympathetic to Beijing, to the CCP, the Communist Party of China. They are using, in this case, our law to suppress the voice of a journalist who is trying to defend our democracy. We think this is outrageous.
Mm-hmm.
We think this is an absolute assault on our democratic norms and traditions and the foundations of the system of government that we have in this country.
Now, people can make accusations, but what is concerning that the accusation led to a criminal prosecution in this case. So the checks and balances within our system to say, well, no, this is ridiculous. This is obviously not what the law was designed to do. Those didn't kick in, and the case went to court. They understand back in court last Thursday and Friday. What's the update on this one, Nick?
Yeah, so we've been supporting Portia since last year when she came to us, and we helped raise awareness and funds in order to mount a legal defence. Because you see, Portia was never able to represent herself when the court order was first issued last year, silencing her from saying anything further about this individual.
Wow.
Now, we also managed to help find her a great barrister. And just to be clear, she's not been criminally prosecuted, but this action's been taken under the HDCA in the Manukau District Court here in Auckland. And it's meant that she hasn't been able to talk since the middle of last year about this individual or the case. If she did, she'd be subject to thousands of dollars in fine. And she could potentially go to prison for 6 months if she violates the order. Now, this is her chance to be heard in court. And I was there on Friday last week at the district court to support her on behalf of the Free Speech Union, because we are so concerned about what is happening here. And we know that this is not the only case of this type.
Yep.
We know the HDCA is being used. Now, we are waiting for an outcome. It could be another couple of weeks at minimum, but it could be longer than that before the judge does issue his decision. It seems very positive. We're very optimistic, but we want people to understand that this would not be dealing with the bigger problem of the HDCA. It's just a huge problem for Portia, and it's a huge problem for our country if this particular case, goes against her. The ruling goes against her. But what we're saying is the HDCA needs to be understood as a highly problematic piece of legislation.
Certainly,
it allows.
Yeah, it certainly has been described as a very poorly written piece of legislation, and I think we can see now from this one that there's more holes in it than a flax kit. And honestly, case law like this would lock in some worst-case scenario situations. Yes, for Portia, but for a whole bunch of other people. Nobody is against reducing the amount of harm that digital communication has on children and high schoolers being bullied. But this is. There's no evidence that it's helping those children, and it's having suppressing consequences on journalists and others in New Zealand.
Yeah, look, the system is sort of set up whereby NetSafe would operate as this sort of arbiter to figure out when there was genuine kind of bullying and victimization happening online when it came to young people. And so people could go to NetSafe, they still can, and under the HDCA, NetSafe kind of figures out whether there's merit to these claims or not.
Okay.
And then if it goes further, it can end up, of course, before the district court. The problem here is that NetSafe appeared to have been made aware at least of some of the claims, the content, but they couldn't properly investigate it because they don't really have those powers to investigate.
Yeah.
They can only look at what is fairly superficial and really just the claims put forward by the complainant. So there's no proper scrutiny here, and these things can get kicked up to the level of district court, and before you know it, we see a situation like Portia's. She now hasn't been able to talk about any of this.
The whole situation with NetSafe, and nothing against them as an organisation, but they seem to be promoted from an industry lobby group to a watchdog with very little change of training or infrastructure, and whether or not they've actually got the resources to do the job that they've now been empowered to do. There's a bit of a question mark on that one.
Yeah, look, don't get us wrong. We're not having a go at NetSafe as an organisation. We think that there's an important role for a group like NetSafe to play here.
Yeah.
But this legislation, in conjunction with NetSafe and these sort of poorly defined pathways for dealing with these kinds of problems, are causing major issues. And I guess one other thing I want to mention, Andrew, is that there is some serious political context to consider here.
Sure.
East Auckland, where much of this has happened in the case of Portia, we've got already a history of key politicians. Jamie Lee Ross, now disgraced national MP, who represented the Botany electorate. In fact, Christopher Luxon's current electorate, he went down because of this type of influence peddling that was going on. Yeah. And this has affected the Labour Party and the National Party. So we need people to realise that East Auckland is something of a kind of a hub or a nexus for this type of CCP influence. We want Portia to be able to get this news out. We want other journalists to be able to talk about it.
Part of the problem with this, as you mentioned in the introduction, though, is just about every political party in New Zealand has received donations from groups connected with the Chinese Communist Party. There's nobody here with, there seems to be nobody in the political spectrum who has a clean ledger on this one. So I suppose somebody who has the political will to tackle this piece of legislation, to do the pruning that is required, particularly when it's likely to annoy New Zealand's major trade partner in a time of trade uncertainty, it gets politically complicated, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, there are people that have money to gain from this. There are others who are afraid, and we understand that. There are particularly many in the Chinese community in New Zealand who are afraid because there are lots of informants, effectively. There are people reporting back to Beijing on certain political activities. I met through Portia's case others who have been affected in this way, who are being targeted by the same individual that's gone after Portia. And the trouble is that even though the major political parties know about this stuff, and even though they've tried at times to talk about it, there has not been a strong stance taken, and there have not been enough really kind of clear statements made saying that we cannot tolerate this kind of thing. So we believe that Portia's case is fundamental, not just for free speech, but actually for our independence as a democracy.
And honestly, this underlines the fact that we need more diligent reporters like Portia to be investigating this sort of thing, to doing the whistleblowing. Somebody who has the background and the bilingual capacity to have conversations on both sides of this very, very thorny and important issue. Certainly, the last thing we need is for people with these skills and background to be gagged on this important conversation.
Absolutely. Transparency, accountability, free speech. This is what it's all about. And, if people care about this issue, then they need to join the cause. Now, I'm always going to be recruiting for the FSU, but we need people. We need people just to be speaking up and actually talking about this issue. So get involved in our cause. Absolutely support Portia. We really would invite people come forward and if possible contribute towards her case, but also get the word out. Tell people about what's going on. And we cannot afford to be intimidated by this type of action. It is fairly sort of insignificant to many people at the moment. And yet we start seeing warships out in the Tasman. Well, that's sort of a more physical demonstration of what we need to be worried about in the future. So I think we need to really step up here as citizens in our democracy and say we won't stand for this kind of nonsense anymore.
Exactly. Free speech, use it or lose it, fsu.nz. Nick, thank you so much for the work that you and the team are doing. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.